the offertory, powerful, and the signing was really beautiful. Does that ring a bell in any of your memory? There's something in that newsletter that I pray you read about our hoping to start a signing choir. Now what you've seen is a small-scale version of what a signing choir will look like. So you don't have, the signing choir signs almost in a beautiful ballet, except they use the face and the hands and everything, as opposed to the legs, while either a recording is played or a soloist or a group is singing. Okay, and Krista King's willing to lead and therefore teach folks that want to be part of a signing choir. Now you know who Krista King is. Okay? Because Krista normally comes to the 11:30 service. And so if you're willing to give it a go, be part of the signing choir, see Krista. Okay? All right. Well, a religious pollster was going around asking people the question, do you believe in the second coming of Christ? And if the answer was yes, there was a follow-up question. What would you do if you knew Jesus was coming back today? And one young man says, look busy, man, look busy. And a lot of us would answer that way, wouldn't we? It seems as though most of us build our lives on the premise that our personal worth, our significance, as well as our meaning in life is dependent upon being busy. Too often we are identified by what we produce and what we achieve. We're even identified nowadays on the basis of how much we consume, how big a house we've got, how nice a car, how far we went in our education, how many public events we attend, how many hobbies we have, what pleasures do we consume. Psychologists and sociologists and psychiatrists and a whole lot of other folks who study the ways of us mortal creatures describe us as driven people. And one of our primary characteristics that a lot of us share is that we're under enormous stress and pressure. We're tyrannized by fear. Fear of failure. Fear we won't achieve. Fear that we won't stack up to other people's expectations of that. Add to that the confusion about who we are and our uncertainty about where we're going. And we end up with stressed out people. The strained relationships we know, the staggering divorce rates, the distrust that characterizes all kinds of relationships, and the growing climate of violence. Those are all consequences of the stressed out life. Burnout. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard it. You know what it means. Because we see people all around us collapsing into numbness and addiction. If it's not addiction to drugs and alcohol, it's addiction to television, addiction to pleasure, addiction to the rat race of getting ahead. I was listening to the news on the radio, on National Public Radio, and it was talking about how most of us don't take all of the vacation to which our employer says we're entitled. Especially millennials, the millennial generation. They're probably the worst, no doubt, because us baby boomers haven't set a very good example. Notwithstanding the fact that studies again and again and again show, and the employers know this, that employees that do take time off, regular time off, take all the time off that they are entitled to, are more productive. Is it any wonder that a USA Today poll a couple of years back showed that an overwhelming majority of folks from all different walks of life in our culture, they asked what they wanted out of life? They said, peace of mind. So we come to our gospel lesson from Luke's gospel, the story of those best-known sisters in the New Testament, Mary and Martha. Jesus came to Mary and Martha's house. He stayed with them. Martha was busy with all the things that hostesses had to do. She's cleaning, cooking, baking, attending to the needs of her guests. Mary, on the other hand, she didn't lift a finger to help. She sat at Jesus' feet, listened to the conversation and all the teaching. Now, in this day and age, we're probably disappointed in Mary, because she wasn't concerned for her sister and what her sister, all the work she was doing. And we'd probably say, how rude. But if we had been Jews in first century Palestine, we would have seen Mary's behavior in a much worse light. Because back then there was an unbreakable law of hospitality. Dr. Luke starts out that passage. You notice it said Jesus came to Mary and Martha's house as a guest. Right. When you brought someone into your home or into your tent, you had a moral obligation to provide for whatever their needs might be, even to the point of giving up what you might have. It wasn't just a matter of being courteous, it was the law of society. And so Martha was busy doing what was expected, not out of hospitality in the superficial sense. She was doing what was demanded of her by one of the deepest and most profound and most binding customs of her time. So Mary's frivolous attitude toward the law of hospitality would have been scandalous. That's the story. So what are we to learn from this scandal? Well, I think the first thing we need to learn is that the Bible here confirms something that we all know, that people are all wired up differently. Have different temperaments. You know, Mary and Martha were different from each other. Martha was one of those active, get things done, organizing types, and Mary was reflective. She was quiet. She wanted to sit literally at Jesus' feet and listen and learn. Now, I'm not sure that we pay enough attention to this in our families or in other relationships. And I don't even think we give enough attention to it in the church. Some people are just natural dynamos of human activity, right? And others are inclined to being very quiet and reserved. And in the church, sometimes we can expect people to all fit into the same mold. We love go-getters in the church. I know that when the nominating committee works every year selecting leadership for the church, that's always a big question. But more often than not, that committee is tempted to select people that get things done, that can be counted on. People that are really inclined toward hyperactivity. Even within the church, we need to realize that not all people have the same temperament. And the reason that's so important is there's no right or wrong way to serve God. God didn't make us all alike. I mean, just look around. Now, some of us have taken the Myers-Briggs test. It's really a measurement of temperament, if you will. It reveals dimensions of our personality and how we perceive things, how we process information, how we respond and react to the world, whether we're an extrovert or an introvert, whether intuition or sensing is dominant, whether we're highly structured and judge or whether we perceive more flexibly, whether we make decisions dependent primarily on our thinking or on our gut, our feeling. It's amazing what couples in a marriage or those who are preparing for marriage can discover about each other by taking that little assessment. And if they'll use that information and insight as they build their life together, their marriage is going to be a much richer, more rewarding one, because there's nothing more important in a relationship than to accept the fact that each person is different. God made them that way, and there's nothing inherently bad with being different. God made us that way. Each of us is a unique, unrepeatable miracle of God. So in telling the story, Luke's affirming we're different, and that's okay. Now the second thing is that we can learn from that is it is awfully easy for us to be distracted from the center. We can neglect, we can focus on the good, and we can neglect the best. I mean, Martha's working out her obligation to be to a hilt, and she was doing absolutely the right thing in terms of the deepest and most profound and binding customs of her day. But I suspect she would have liked to have heard what Jesus was saying too. But there was a meal to be prepared, and Jesus was their guest. They had to be fed, they had to be taken care of. But there's a tyranny here. One we don't often recognize is sometimes called the tyranny of the immediate or the tyranny of the urgent. Most of us again are driven to do what has to be done immediately without giving much thought to the overall situation. Now Jesus taught us about that in another situation. He was talking to the Pharisees in the 11th chapter of Luke's Gospel. Talking about how the Pharisees, they'd lost all perspective and sense of proportion with regard to their various duties and their duties and responsibilities to other people. He said in the 42nd verse, "But woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and herbs of all kinds and neglect justice and the love of God." Remember what Amos had to say about justice? It is those you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. They had taken the letter of the law to an extreme, and they had violated the purpose and the spirit of the law. Of course they should tithe. Now, I hate to disappoint any of you, but Jesus did not retract or withdraw the standard of the tithe as faithful stewardship for God's people. But the Pharisees had gone to ridiculous lengths on this. They were tithing their tiny little herbs and forgetting that there was a higher law than the law of the tithe. And that law was to love God and love neighbor. To do justice. To love mercy. So Jesus' words to Martha are a warning to us. Don't get distracted from the center. Don't do what's good and neglect the best. We can become victims of the tyranny of immediate demands. And the final thing is, all of us need to find, and we need to take the time to let our souls catch up with our bodies. So often we are so anxious to do something, we forget to be someone. We get so wrapped up in doing something, we forget to be someone. Doing's important. I mean, it's vital that things get done. But the world of being is also vital. The world of quiet listening and getting in touch with our inner feelings and coming close to people. The world of meditation and prayer, of watching sunrise, sunset, seeing things in the world as though for the first time. Now, I am not putting down folks to get all wrapped up in this new game, Pokemon Go. I'm not, because the good thing is it's getting people out and they're moving around or being active, right? But have you noticed? There are a lot of people that are going through life like this. Okay? And they're missing a whole big, beautiful world all around them. You know, it's just a continuation of what I experienced when I was a chaplain at the last National Boy Scout Jamboree. And they touted, oh, it's the most wired jamboree the Boy Scouts of America have ever had. And we're at this awesome place in West Virginia with, rappelling and rock climbing and firing all kinds of things that go boom, and mountain biking. It wasn't a good day unless some kid broke an arm. Yet there are all these crowds hanging around the cell phone charging stations. Rather than getting out, we need time to encounter a world of laughter and of fun, of wonder and awe. And it can't happen if we don't find and take the time to let our souls catch up with our bodies. NASA commissioned a study for how to determine how much personal space people really needed. Because, quite frankly, you get inside those spacecraft, it gets a little tight at times. And the study showed that strangers don't like to get any closer than 14 to 17 inches from each other. And most folks prefer more than that. Now, we all know that. I mean, just think about our behavior in church. If we may sit next to a spouse, right? Or someone that we've known a long time and we really like, but otherwise we kind of prefer that empty chair in between us and the next person, right? I'm not wrong, I know, come on. But not only do we need those margins of space around ourselves, we need margins of space around our spirits. Inner space, silence around our souls, okay? We know stress is not good for us. We know that. If it doesn't cause disease, it makes them worse, right? So we need to find the place, take the time to let our souls catch up with our bodies. A pastor shared an experience he had with a member of his congregation who was a resident in a convalescent home. And Annie was looking out the window of her room when we walked in, and she said, "Preacher, come over here, look at those birds out on the patio." She said, "When I was a little girl on the farm back in Missouri, one Sunday morning my father called me to get ready for church. I was watching some blackbirds out our window, and I said, 'Papa, I wish I could be like those blackbirds and fly away when I want to. I don't want to go to church today.' My papa knelt beside me and said gently, 'Annie, there will come a day when you will want to go to church and you will not be able to attend. Then you'll realize why it's so important.' She turned to face her pastor, and tears in her eyes, and said, 'Today's one of those days. Today's one of those days.' We need to let our souls catch up with our bodies. And worship is one of the ways we do that. That's another interesting trend that we've gotten, and I don't think it's healthy, where we've let other things become more important than taking the time to gather with our brothers and sisters in Christ and worship. And we need other things. We need those times of prayer and meditation. We need deliberate retreats. That's more than just a getaway. It's just time to do something different, remove ourselves from some things, and really reflect on our relationship with God. I'm getting ready to take an annual leave that the United Methodist Church says pastors they have a right to and they ought to take. And I'm going out to Montana. Barbara and I are going out to Montana. And you know, I hope cell phone service sucks there. It does. That's going to be hard because I'm used to being connected 24/7. But I just hope I don't get a signal. Okay? You're going to be in great hands with Pastor Deb, and I'll be back. Lord willing, creek don't rise, I'll be back. Okay? But I need to take some time to let my soul catch up with my body too. Okay? So we can see Mary and Martha, they teach us lots of things, but the number one thing, there are three things. Number one is you know, we need to respect and honor. God wired us up differently. Secondly, we need to remember, let's not get distracted by the tyranny of the urgent and really focus on the best. And the third, take time. Find ways to let your soul catch up with your body. I invite you to stand if you're able, and let's sing as we close our service.